Pat Sajak hosted over 8,000 episodes and earned millions, but he kept a dark secret for decades. He missed every single wedding anniversary. He wasn't there for most of his daughters' birthdays. While America watched him spin the wheel, his family watched him disappear. In 2019, a medical emergency almost killed him. As he lay in the hospital, he made a list of promises that would end his career. What he wrote on that paper reveals the devastating price of fame. What happened in that operating room made him walk away from everything. Patrick Leonard Sajak was born in Chicago on October 26, 1946 at exactly 7:26 in the morning. His father, Leonard Sajak, a Polish-American steel hauler, brought home $7,240 a week while his mother Joyce worked part-time wrapping candy. They lived in a cramped third-floor apartment with a cold stove and broken heating that failed 6 winters in a row. After Leonard died of liver failure in 1962, Pat was just 15. He took on a paper route and delivered the Chicago Daily News at 4 a.m. to help pay the $41 rent until his mother remarried in 1963. During that time, Pat was often spotted practicing weather forecasts into a cracked mirror he had pulled from a Humboldt Park alley. At Farragut High School, Pat wasn't the most athletic or loudest kid, but he showed up in 3 clubs: Radio Workshop, Polish Club, and Hall of Fame Committee. His real motivation was access to the school's Realtor tape recorder. He'd skip lunch just to mimic Chicago radio voices. He lived far from school, and the bus and train ride took an hour and a half each way. He never paid the 15-cent street car fee, saving every tip from his paper route. 2 weeks after graduation, he landed a night job at the Palmer House Hilton from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. He handled wake-up calls and delivered telegrams to guests. He once brought a 3-page Western Union wire to Judy Garland at 2:43 a.m. The best part of the job was the hotel's quiet phone line between 3 and 4 a.m. That's when Pat practiced timing his weather updates to the chimes of the lobby's old grandfather clock. On January 7, 1965, Chicago's WLSAM radio station ran a contest asking for a short essay, starting with "Everybody Knows the Night Belongs to Pat." Scribbled his 60 words during a late shift at the hotel and mailed it using a stolen envelope. Out of more than 27,000 entries, Pat's name was pulled live on air on February 19 at 9:11 p.m. He was given a guest DJ spot and played the Beatles' 8 Days a Week while joking about a fictional pierogi restaurant. The phones rang non-stop. WLS's program director wanted to hire him, but union rules got in the way. Still, he walked away with an audition tape that he used for years. That fall, he enrolled at Columbia College Chicago. During a routine radio class, instructor Al Parker heard Pat read a crime blot aloud and stopped the class. "You sound like 50,000 watts, Parker said. Within a week, Pat was working the midnight to 6 a.m. shift at WDC-AM for minimum wage and unlimited coffee. His first words on air were, "Good morning, Insomniac Chicago. Time to hold up the sky." He mispronounced Chopin 4 times, but still managed to double the station's male listenership. Parker later helped him win a $500 scholarship, which covered a year of tuition, as long as he agreed to tutor freshman students on microphone skills. That tutoring gig introduced him to a fellow student who led him to the Armed Forces radio path that would change his life. On April 16, 1968, Pat was drafted into the Army and assigned the role of clerk typist. After basic training in typing school, he expected to stay stateside, but he ended up in Vietnam at Long Binh Post, the financial hub for nearly 500,000 U.S. troops. He worked 12-hour shifts crunching numbers and issuing combat pay. He later joked that the loudest blasts he heard came from adding machines, but he still felt uneasy doing desk work while others were dodging real fire. He sent in 4 requests to transfer to Armed Forces Radio, and all were denied. Only after his local congressman intervened did things change. When Pat finally arrived at the Saigon radio studio on October 8, 1968, he was handed the same microphone once used by Adrian Croner, whose Good Morning Vietnam had become legendary. The studio had sandbags stacked high and a loaded pistol taped under the desk, just in case. At one point, a taxi full of explosives blew up outside the building. Still, Pat kept the show going, and soldiers across Vietnam tuned in. They said his voice reminded them of home. One listener wrote that he sounded like Chicago pizza at 0600. That kind of feedback meant more than any ratings book. Over the next 15 months, Pat opened 420 morning shows across 5 different transmitters. His broadcast reached an area as large as California. On Christmas Eve 1969, he made a mistake. That became part of his legend. He was told to air President Nixon's Christmas message, but accidentally faded the speech halfway through and played Sugar instead. Nixon spoke into silence for 37 seconds. Pat later said that was the day he outdid Watergate, at least in Saigon. Even with that blunder, his show received more than 3,000 letters a month, more than any other armed forces broadcast. Pat used comedy as a kind of defense. He made up fake weather reports, created jingles about keeping your M16 clean, and even called imaginary baseball games using newswire blurbs. His audience wasn't just soldiers. Vietnamese civilians and even North Vietnamese spies were known to tune in, practicing their English using his broadcast. Sometimes he was flown by helicopter to remote military bases to warm up crowds for Bob Hope's USO shows. Soldiers later said his voice helped keep them sane after long patrols in the jungle.